This session is a perfect follow-up to the student panel on Blackboard. And I'm Jane Neapolitan from the Office of Academic Innovation, and we have with us today 3 faculty who are among the high-end users of Blackboard, and they're going to talk about very specific ways that you can use Blackboard in order to address certain challenges for teaching. And so I would like to welcome Melanie, and she will introduce herself.
I'm Melanie Formenton. I'm a third-year assistant professor in Mass Comm and Comm Studies. And my background in online teaching really started with my undergraduate education, because I actually was taking undergraduate classes as a master's student, or as I was taking undergraduate classes online, and then I took some as a master's student. So when I went to my PhD program, I was lucky enough to go to Penn State University, where they have a really good, well-known online teaching program. So I really kind of used that to my advantage, where tried to find out about, and so I was able to do some like online courses, teach some online courses, but then also take part in some of their certificates for online teaching. So what I'm really going to talk to you about today are 2 classes that I've taught. First, I taught a hybrid course for mass communication research, and that was an undergraduate course. And then I also have taught twice now a graduate level online only course for crisis communication. And so the undergraduate course was a 5-week course. It was a hybrid where we met in class 2 days a week, but they also had to do work online, and that was a flipped course. So they were expected to do their lectures and really prepare for class before even coming to class because of that 5-week time period we were working in. But then the graduate level course was a 10-week online only course. So here, the flipped emphasis really meant that students had to prepare before coming to class, which meant that whatever I was using technology-wise for lectures and things like that, I had to try and make it more engaging. And part of that came from having taken an undergraduate online class where it was just a PowerPoint with an instructor who in a very monotone voice was just kind of reading through the slides. And so knowing that I had Panopto available to me, I wanted to make sure that I would be able to translate those lectures into something that felt more like being in a classroom. Because of that, you have students, also undergrads. I have found that they're a little bit less engaged in the research class. I'm in Mass Comm. They all say they hate numbers. I'm like, you can't hate numbers, right? So really trying to get them excited about the material is important. And we didn't have online discussions in this class. With the Crisis Comm class, though, we didn't have any meetings, so that really created a distance for students. One of the things that works out well for me is that I do teach these graduate students in in-person courses, so I do know some of them personally, but there's always going to be a student or 2 that I haven't met. And so being able to get them to understand how I teach things like that, I found really important. The work here is more self-directed. And the students are more engaged at the graduate level. They're more self-sufficient. So I used video and Panopto differently for that class, as we'll talk about. So with the Mass Comm research course, and I can show you about a 1-minute clip for each one, what I did was I was really putting together video lectures. And one of the challenges for me in figuring out how do I create engaging video lectures was making sure that it's not 40 minutes of me droning on in a video. Students aren't going to want to watch that, right? I wouldn't want to watch that. I didn't even want to tape it half the time. I'd be sitting there like, oh gosh, I have to watch this now, right? Because nobody likes watching themselves after they've been recorded. So what I was really doing was kind of going through my regular lectures, going through my regular presentations, and figuring out how do I break these into chunks? And how do I make it so that if I'm a student who is doing this on my own time, right, but I need to have it done by a certain day, I can watch a 5-minute video here, and a 10-minute video there, and a 15-minute video here, right? So what I did was I was really only using Panopto for video lectures in that hybrid course because I still had that face-to-face interaction. I was still able to go to class, answer their questions, talk to them, things like that. So there wasn't really a need for announcements or kind of setting that tone in terms of facilitation because of the fact that, you know, they were getting to meet me, I was getting to meet them, they were doing homework in class, stuff like that. With the crisis comm class, however, because it was more of self-directed readings and really them working on discussions with each other, I was able to take a bit more of a hands-off approach where I really let them run the discussions, kind of guide themselves with questions, things like that. But I didn't want it to be where I was just like this person behind a curtain, you know, kind of overseeing their class but not really communicating with them. So what I started doing with that particular class is that I would put up on Mondays with Melanie video every Monday. And with doing that, what I was able to do is basically the same things that you might do in a regular class, where you kind of highlight, hey, what have we been talking about recently? What are some really good things that we saw in class this week? What do you have due coming up? And what kind of things should you be thinking about as you prepare for the next week? And those videos usually ranged from like maybe 5 to 6, 7 minutes long, really depending on how many announcements I had and things like that. So just to give you an idea of how these things kind of look different, I wasn't able to check if audio is running here yet, but basically with this is more of my lecture one, where what I did for this is that as much as I didn't really like doing it,
Hey everyone, so next we're going to talk about focus groups. And
what I would do is have it so that students could see me talking, but then also see the presentation and the slide. And that way it's not just them watching. And I mean, when I started filming it, I was like, there's no way they're going to really care about it. But apparently they actually like seeing our faces, because it's not just watching this PowerPoint go for 10 minutes.
as I mentioned already, focus groups and interviews are kind of similar. It's just that when you're doing a focus group, you're basically conducting multiple interviews at the same time. So you may or may not be familiar with the focus group, but basically it's a
So not to give you a focus group lesson, this is really kind of how it works. So you saw that the way that the page flipped, you can see on the bottom, you can't see it very well right here, but students can actually scroll to different slides in the presentation. And so I'll talk a little bit about how that was actually something students really appreciated. Then for the plain just weekly video updates, it's just me talking. So just this basic, hey, what's going on? I'm here.
Hey everyone, so welcome to week 5 of Mondays with Melanie. I was actually really excited responding to your posts, grading your responses, and then the power went out. And we thought actually it was going to come back after midnight, so I was like, oh.
Anyway, so yeah, so now you can see my personality shining. So the thing is with this, it's just 2 different ways of communicating information. And with this, with Panopto, I guess I could have talked to you a bit about what things were first, but we'll talk about using Panopto really quickly. When you're using Panopto, you do need to download an interface. You do need to download the software, but then it becomes part of your Blackboard. So as long as you've got it on your computer, you can basically record from your phone, computer, it doesn't matter. And it becomes part of your course tools. So when you click on that tools link that students can see, they also have access to Panopto. So the same way that students were talking in this last session about the idea of uploading video and stuff like that, this is a tool that if they don't have a phone or YouTube or things like that, or if you want to have it where you collect all their videos in one spot, you can actually have students use Panopto as well, and it becomes part of those course tools for you. And it's really easy to create video. So here actually, I'm taking an online edge course right now, and so I just screen grabbed, and there's Audrey. So if you ever need help, OAI is amazing. And Audrey Cutler is one of those people that you can actually talk to. But it's really easy to see where like you could do schedule recording, record a new session, and pick a folder that you put your stuff in. So for example, I have everything organized by class, but you can actually go through and see other things that people have recorded on the university's main server. There is also an interface for choosing the display. So my suggestion, and this is just a personal preference, is if you're lucky enough to have dual monitors, that is amazing for using Panopto, because then if you've got some sort of script that you're working with, you can have that kind of side by side. but also then you can have the interface up so you can see what's being recorded, but then also have your actual PowerPoint or whatever you're showing. But the nice thing is that it's not just PowerPoint. You can just pull up whatever's on the monitor and say, I want to show what's on the monitor. So for example, I've done introductions where I show students how to use the course website, things like that. And then you'll see that you can embed and share those links. So I just used a regular link to those videos. So in general, students really like this, both at the undergrad and graduate level. At the undergrad level, they like the ability to rewatch the material, find slides, things like that. They like the information chunking, and that they were basically self-guided. But with preparedness, some students came to class more prepared, and some students came to class realizing that, hey, I should have watched those videos. And so relying on that for a hybrid class is kind of a risk that we take. But they didn't necessarily love the pace, because it went really fast. Whereas grad students, they just like the engagement. That for them was like, hey, the week is starting, Mondays with Melanie is here. So I'm out of time, but
Sorry.
no, you're all right.
Okay.
So if you have any questions about Panopto, I'm more than happy to answer them for you.
All right, thank you very much. And thank you also for giving that plug for the Office of Academic Innovation, because that's what we do. All right, next we're going to hear from Amy.
Good afternoon. I'm Amy Cedrone. I'm with the Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies in the College of Liberal Arts. I was asked to talk about the context and the problems I was facing or the limitations I was facing in a course so that I could explain why I chose to use the tools I did. My instructional challenges are primarily in face-to-face courses, and I do teach online as well, but this is all about a face-to-face course, not a hybrid, fully face-to-face. I had difficulty collecting and organizing assignments for face-to-face courses, especially when I'm teaching 3 to 4 sections of the same class. With 35 students a section, you do the math, that's a lot of paper. And I had difficulty keeping my grade records handy so that I could talk to students about grades. It wasn't a problem for me to do grades, it was a problem for me to get back to students when they wanted information about grades. And I wanted to be able to have up-to-date grade records in real time because I do weighted grades, not just straight points divided by points possible. So I wanted to be able to do that. I also, as we all do, wanted to be able to detect plagiarism more easily. And I wanted to be able to identify students who needed a little more help doing things like citations and bibliographies and proper formatting. So with all that in mind, I chose a PHIL 103 Introductory Ethics course as my example. This is a TU core requirement, and so I get a lot of people who have to take this class who will never take another philosophy class again. So it's a very, very basic information delivery class. There are writing assignments all throughout the course, and most philosophy classes tend to be writing heavy. Most of the students were aged 18 to 25, but I had a few people taking the class who were of retirement age and were taking it for free for personal interest, but were taking it for a grade. They were not surveying the course or auditing. They were taking it and doing the assignments as well. I'm looking at 2 to 3 sections of this course in a semester, so 125 students minimum. That's 125 papers every time there's an assignment. Most of the students had some experience using Blackboard. There were a few students who did not, and they tended to be students who were over 25, but it was not difficult to walk them through it. And that was a hurdle that I was willing to take time outside of class to overcome, and they were willing to meet me for that. Some students who were younger did ask to be walked through submitting an assignment online, and their primary concern was, how do I know that you really got it? But during the earlier Blackboard panel with the students, they mentioned being able to get that confirmation that your assignment was submitted and received. So there were, of these, within this context, I'm going back to my challenges and concerns. So I want to be able to collect and organize assignments. I want to be able to keep up-to-date grade records in real time, detect plagiarism, and then identify students who need more help. So I used 3 tools to do all of this. Online assignment submission addressed 2 of my concerns. I could collect and organize assignments easily and efficiently. I could keep up-to-date grade records for all students in real time because you can set up the grade book in Blackboard so that it either does or does not keep a real-time grade available. I choose to do that for reasons that I'll mention in a moment. But the online assignment submission involves writing the assignment in Word or in OpenOffice or in some kind of text software, or even writing directly in the right submission box in Blackboard, and then submitting the assignment online. And it saves a lot of paper and allows me to collect assignments easily without the big bundle. And especially when you don't have a break between classes, you can't go back to your office to dump things. I was coming out of classes when I did paper assignments with this much paper, it felt like, with my books and my handbag, and that's hard on your back. So there were some practical elements to this as well as the coursework elements. Online assignment submission is very easy. If you can attach something to an email, you can submit an assignment on Blackboard. That's how I explain it to students. And the students who were older frequently had, say, a 6-year-old that they could call on, like a grandchild or a child, who could show them how to attach something, because children are getting instruction about computers younger and younger now. So that was something that was easily worked around. As for keeping the up-to-date grade records, I knew that I could tell anybody at any point easily, as long as I had access to a computer, what their grade was and what that was based on, and they could see it for themselves. Now, the Safe Assign tool is something you can use within assignment submissions. Some of us, including myself, have used Turnitin in the past, which is separate from Blackboard. Safe Assign is kind of like Turnitin, but it's part of Blackboard. And if you ever use Turnitin, you know that students actually have to upload the assignment in 2 places, to Blackboard and then somewhere else. And some of them just didn't do it because it was too much to upload in 2 places. The Safe Assign tool is wonderful because it's all there and it's more efficient. You don't have to use it for any assignment that they do, but you can. You have the option of making what is called the originality report available to the student or not. For my own reasons, I make it available, and I allow multiple submissions of an assignment. So if a student, for example, wanted to do an assignment a week ahead and upload it and see what the originality report told them, to make sure they'd done their citations correctly, to make sure all quotes were in quotation marks, and to make sure that everything was credited the way it should be, they could do that, see the report, edit the paper and re-upload, and it would generate a new report. So it is handy for the students. I'm not going to pretend to know that everybody looks at their originality report, but I know that some of them did because they would email me asking for help or asking how they were supposed to read it, because sometimes it wasn't exactly clear. The Safe Assign tool also helps me to identify the students who really did need some extra help learning how to do citations, bibliographies, works cited. Everybody has to take a course in English composition at some point at Towson, but they may have taken it 3 or 4 semesters before. They may be working in a different discipline or with a different professor where citations aren't as important or it's a more casual atmosphere, but I ask them to do citations and bibliographies, so they need to be able to demonstrate that they can do that. And the Safe Assign tool was a good objective way for me to be able to hand them a paper and say, look, it's wrong. I'm not making a target of you. This isn't personal. This isn't my opinion. The tool says you haven't cited it properly, so let's talk about how you can fix it. So the third item, which ties in with online assignment submission and Safe Assign, is the Grade Center. When you create an assignment, it automatically has a spot created in the Grade Center in Blackboard. And the single most important concern I had there was I wanted to have up-to-date grade records for all my students that were accurate based on what had been turned in so far. And they can see it, which means it reduces the number of questions. What's my grade? Can you tell me what my grade is? How am I doing in the class? Should I switch to pass-fail? Because this is a core requirement. I get a lot of juniors and seniors who put it off. It's not their major, and they're wondering, should I take it pass-fail so that I don't risk harming my GPA because this is not my area? And they can easily make that decision for themselves if they can see their grade. Now, all this being the case, what were the results? First of all, with online assignment submission, the overwhelming response from students is, it's so convenient. Thank you so much for not having me print things, which I could lose, which I could drop in the parking lot and get filthy, which you might not get. So they liked the convenience. I can set deadlines any day of the week. They don't have to be in class to turn things in. Now, I could set a deadline before class, but what I found really, really worked was Sunday night. Sunday night is a great deadline. It's the end of the weekend. They have to get up early the next day, so they can't be out too late. And I could easily email a reminder to everyone, remember your journal's due tonight. And that deadline worked better than middle of the week or Friday or Saturday. It just worked better. And I have a dog who likes to eat papers. And I didn't have to hand back papers with dog drool and fang marks anymore because he would get a hold of them and just eat them or chew on them. Now, Safe Assign. What happened? This is quasi-scientific, so bear with me. The incidence of plagiarism did go down more rapidly than it tended to when I was using Turnitin or when I was manually checking papers for plagiarism. Usually by the 4th assignment out of 8, people tend to stop plagiarizing intentionally or otherwise. With this, because they had the tools in Safe Assign to show them where the plagiarism was possibly showing up, it went down much more quickly. Some students did use the originality report and told me so. That's how I know that, because they said, I liked the report. Thank you for making it available. I used it. I hope it'll be better. Please tell me if I'm still not getting it right. If the report showed a high degree of plagiarism, like it gives a percentage rating. If it says that 75% of this paper is from other sources, for the first offense or incidents, what I would typically do is let the student know that they should look at it, and I haven't graded it yet, but you need to look at it. And I wouldn't say, looks like it's ripped off to me. I would just say, look at it. And if they looked at it and said, it's fine, then it got an F. And I said, all right, you've clearly not cited correctly. So I did give them a chance if it had a very high rating. And I'm sure that there are people who would say, I should not have done that, but I found it was useful. And the grade center. Students did check their grades themselves. They were not as ignorant about their grades. They were better able to make their own decision about pass-fail. So I found it was very empowering for the students to have these tools available to them.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, sorry for cutting her off.
You're good.
And next, we will hear from Bonnie Fuller.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Fuller. I teach in the Department of Nursing, and the course that I am going to be talking about is the complex care course. It is in the senior semester for our nursing students, and what I want to talk about is how I worked with the Blackboard staff to integrate one of the learning tools that we utilize in our Department of Nursing. We have a program through Elsevier. It's the Evolve. It has case studies, it has practice tests, it has lots of tools that we recommend that our students use, and we want them to use it because they pay for it. They pay extra every semester throughout the program to be able to utilize this fabulous learning tool. But what we found is that students really don't utilize it to its full potential. So one of the things that I wanted to figure out how to do, my challenge, as we were asked to identify, was to entice the students to use this learning tool without making it mandatory. Because as we all know, if we don't make it mandatory, frequently students won't engage and utilize the tools. But once they recognize that these tools, these textbooks or learning resources or whatever we have, really do help them, they're more apt to use it, and then word gets around with other students, and then students will utilize it more. But I also wanted to make it so that I didn't have to track everybody, because within this outside program, if I wanted to see what students were doing, I had to go to the outside program. And if I utilized that as a learning source or an evaluation method, I would then have to get the grades from that source and integrate it into Blackboard. So what we were able to do is use the LTI, which is a acronym that I believe stands for Learning Tool Integration, and the tool provider in Blackboard to link the two learning systems, so they're automatically connected. Now, there is some background stuff that Blackboard has to do to set up your course to be able to do this. But once Blackboard has set it all up, then it's a matter of just going in and putting in the case studies, using whatever I want to, and putting them where they belong. So what I did, oh good, so here's this, it's a third-party tool provider, and it then integrates into a direct link. So in setting it up, I've showed you here that first slide that shows oxygenation perfusion. It's one of my modules. And so I select under build content, I select a web link, and then within the web link, it says create web link. And all you have to do is put in the URL, and then I describe what it is, and it's integrated within my course where I want it to be. So we have access to, oh gosh, probably maybe 100 or so case studies that are then specific to the content that I'm teaching, and I'll pick the case study that I want the students to utilize, and I create this web link. And then what happens is it gets put in. So here's my module, and under my resources, I put in Evolve Case Study, and it says exactly what the case study is. And then when the student clicks on it, it immediately goes to the outside learning tool, and they do the case study. And so here, this is what it shows what it is. It's embedded within, and then they can do the case study. And then once they do the case study, the grade is automatically uploaded within the Grade Center. And I can choose if I want this case study to be part of their homework grades, or I can just leave it as a learning tool for the students. And so this is a copy of where you can see where this is where I have made it at the end of, how your grade book can be huge. This is at the end of the grade book, and all the students can see what they're doing. And you can see some students have a 75 and a 70, and some students haven't done it. Because with this particular case study, I didn't make it mandatory. I only made it highly recommended. And one of the things that I'm finding with students is that it really is supporting my classroom instruction because it is easy access. We've had these tools for years and the students haven't used them. And now that it's embedded within my course, the students are using them more. And it also is really helpful for me because I'm able to talk with the student. And when the student tells me, for instance, on their first exam, this case study DBT, would give them information and more learning resources that prepare them for the first exam. And on their first exam, if they don't do so well, they'll come to me and we'll talk about how they're doing. And I'll just pull up the grade book and they can see that we had these case studies and they didn't do them. And we'll talk about the benefits of that. And then on the next exam, they do better, and I can track, I can see the student, what they're doing or not doing. And it is so interesting because in some of the conversations with students, having them recognize their own accountability for learning, and the student panel for Blackboard in the last session was awesome because it supported what I believe and what I talk with my students about being self-directed learners and about recognizing where their strengths are and their weaknesses are, and having all of these resources readily available that they can see in their grade book, because we just heard how students love seeing their grades. And so they can see that they've got good grades or bad grades. And I can also help the students connect to recognize that getting a 50% on a case study is not a good grade. I was just amazed when we was talking with the student, I was asking her, and she said, well, I got a 50%. And I was very direct, and I said, a 50% is an F. Is that really where you want to be? And she just really hadn't connected. She thought it was fine. She got half of them right. And so helping them recognize that what they do in preparation really does support their learning, and then their outcomes are improved. I am tracking now. I've just done this for 2 semesters, and now I'm going to be tracking to see how student grades are different, hopefully so, improved, based upon students who engage in this outside learning and utilizing the case studies versus students who don't. Obviously, it's usually the more motivated students who access all of these resources, but hopefully with the communication that students have within Blackboard, with talking with each other, they'll recognize that the more that they engage in these case studies, the more that they're going to be able to improve their exam grades. So that's my presentation for talking about how to integrate this. There is some background work that does need to be done with Blackboard to get it set up, but once you get it set up, it just runs every semester and works really, really well. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So we have about 5 minutes or so for questions or comments from the audience. Obviously, the faculty on the panel are very experienced. They've been working at this for a long time. They have a certain set of knowledge and skills, but we all have to begin somewhere, even if it's just for making a very small change. I would say if you have technical questions about Blackboard, for example, Bonnie brought up the LTI, you know, I have this tool or this thing that I want to put into Blackboard to make it easier for students, then you need to meet with Blackboard team. That's Matt Wind and Tricia Halstead. They are on the technical side, the technology, the IT. They can set your Blackboard site up to accommodate some of the things that you would like to do. On the other hand, the Office of Academic Innovation can help with things, with tools that are more about the pedagogy itself, not so much about the technology integration, but how you can use different tools to address your pedagogical goals and objectives. Okay, so I've given my spiel. The library is also a part of our team. I see more collaboration now between OTS, OAI, and the library. Your librarian for your department or college is also a very good source, and I'm going to ask Miriam to share something.
Hi everyone, I'm Miriam Desharnais, and I'm a research and instruction librarian, and in under a minute I'll show you one quick thing you can do with the ease of access being the thing that makes students use tools. On the library's website, we put it front and center, there is a research guide for every discipline. And if you embed that link to the research guide within your course, your students are much likelier to get citation help and to go to the resources which you can help pick out. So you click here where it says research guides, and then you can search by subject. And you could embed the guide, which includes a handy dandy link to your librarian. Hello, Shauna Gass. If there is one for your course, then you would see it right here. So if there is, for example, a film-based course like Education 202, rather than your students trying to figure out where to go or you having to link to 30 films in Blackboard, you could link to this Education 202 guide, and then your students can easily get to all the resources. So you just add it like any other content. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jane, for letting me butt in.
Yes.